Have you ever blinked, and in that blink, lived an entire dream? Not the gentle drift of sleep, just a sudden microscopic collapse of reality. 1 second you're standing in a hallway or staring at your phone or listening to someone speak, and the next, your mind has already projected a scene with characters, emotion, even a storyline, then erased it, leaving only a strange aftertaste. Was that real? For some people, this isn't a metaphor. It's a neurological ambush, where REM-like dreaming leaks into wakefulness in fragments so short they feel impossible, yet vivid enough to rearrange your sense of time, memory, and self. And the most unsettling part? Sometimes the dream lasts only seconds, but your brain reacts as if it lasted forever. Today we're diving into a phenomenon that sits right at the fault line between waking life and sleep, narcolepsy, with spontaneous, seconds-long dreams. These are not full nights of dreaming, and not even typical naps. They're micro-intrusions, brief bursts of dream imagery, narrative, or emotional scenes that can appear in the middle of normal life, sometimes lasting only a few seconds, sometimes leaving behind a memory that feels oddly compressed, as if your brain ran a whole movie trailer in the space of a breath. Narcolepsy is commonly described as a disorder of excessive daytime sleepiness, but that description is too polite. What it really involves is instability in the boundaries of sleep states, especially REM sleep, the phase most strongly linked to vivid dreaming. In narcolepsy, the brain can slide into REM too quickly, or allow REM-like features to spill into wakefulness. That spillover is why some people experience hypnagogic hallucinations, dreamlike perceptions as they fall asleep, hypnopompic hallucinations as they wake, and even sleep paralysis, the terrifying mismatch where the mind wakes up while the body stays temporarily locked in REM atonia. But the seconds-long dreams are particularly strange because they can feel like a glitch in time. They challenge a basic assumption we all carry, that dreams require sleep and sleep requires duration. Yet here, the mind can generate dream content so rapidly and so convincingly that the line between internal and external reality becomes momentarily unstable. And that raises the central question of this video. What exactly is happening in the mind and the brain when a dream appears in seconds, while you're technically awake? To understand seconds-long dreams in narcolepsy, we have to stop thinking of the mind as a light switch, awake or asleep, and start thinking of it as a border checkpoint. In most people, that checkpoint is heavily guarded. In narcolepsy, the guards are exhausted, the gates malfunction, and states that should never overlap begin to bleed into each other. Psychologically, what you call a dream isn't just a random story. A dream is a meaning-making machine running without external supervision. It takes fragments, faces, fears, unfinished conversations, bodily sensations, stray memories, and stitches them into a scene that feels coherent for the few seconds you're inside it. Now imagine that machine turning on while you're still partially oriented to the world. That's where the experience becomes uncanny. People with narcolepsy often describe moments where reality doesn't fade gently, it fractures. The mind slips into a micro-state where internal imagery becomes dominant and external input becomes muffled or distorted. This can look like a sudden flash of a place you've never been, yet somehow recognize a single frame of a storyline with emotion already attached, a brief but intense conviction that someone spoke your name, a scene that feels symbolic, like your brain is speaking in metaphors faster than you can translate. From a psychological perspective, these episodes often borrow from processes we already know exist in everyday life, just amplified. 1. Attention collapse and automatic mind. When you're extremely sleepy, attention doesn't simply weaken, it can drop out. The brain may keep your body moving on autopilot while your conscious monitoring fades. This is why narcolepsy can involve automatic behaviors, doing small actions without fully remembering them. If your attention blinks, your mind can fill that gap with internally generated content, sometimes dreamlike, sometimes more like a vivid daydream, but with a key difference. The content has the texture of REM dreaming. meaning it can feel less voluntary, more cinematic, and emotionally loaded. 2. Predictive processing. The brain as a storyteller. Modern cognitive science often describes perception as prediction. Your brain constantly guesses what's happening, using incomplete sensory input. When the boundary between sleep and wake becomes unstable, the prediction engine can become overly confident, pushing internally generated scenes into awareness. In other words, you're not only seeing the world, you're seeing your brain's best narrative guess, briefly untethered from reality checks. That's why seconds-long dreams can feel like reality trying on another version of itself. 3. Emotion as an accelerant. Dream content is rarely neutral. In narcolepsy, strong emotion can shape symptoms in surprising ways. For example, cataplexy, sudden loss of muscle tone, can be triggered by laughter, surprise, or anger. Even when cataplexy isn't present, emotional systems can still act like gasoline on the mind's imagery generator. A brief flash dream may be built from fear, desire, or unresolved tension, because those memories are already highly accessible. And when emotion is high, the brain compresses time. A few seconds can feel longer, not because time truly stretches, but because the episode is encoded as significant, vivid, and strange. 4. Memory fragments and the aftertaste of unreality. Many people report that these micro-dreams leave behind an eerie residue, confusion, déjà vu, or a sensation that something important happened but can't be retrieved. That makes sense psychologically. You're catching a mental event that may begin in a REM-like mode, where narrative is strong but memory recording is inconsistent, and then snapping back to wakefulness. The result is a fragment, not a full dream you can replay, but a partial imprint that lingers like perfume in an empty room. So the psychological core of the phenomenon is this. Narcolepsy destabilizes the border between internal simulation and external reality. And when that border flickers, the mind does what it always does. It tells a story. It just does it in seconds, and then demands you live with the echo. To make sense of seconds-long dreams, we need to look at what narcolepsy really is at the brain level, a disorder of sleep-wake state control, especially the mechanisms that normally keep REM sleep in its proper place. In a typical brain, REM is a carefully orchestrated condition, vivid imagery, emotional intensity, and a body that's effectively switched off to keep you from acting out the dream. The remarkable part is that REM isn't just sleep, it's a specific neurochemical and network state. In narcolepsy, especially narcolepsy type 1, one of the key problems is the loss of hypocretin orexin neurons in the hypothalamus. Orexin is like a stabilizer. It helps keep wakefulness steady and prevents sudden, unwanted transitions into REM-like patterns. When orexin is low, the brain becomes state unstable, like a train system with broken signals, where the brain can drift into REM-related activity too quickly, too often, and at the wrong times. That's why narcolepsy isn't just sleepiness, it's intrusion. REM intrusion, dreaming without permission. Seconds-long dream episodes can be understood as micro-REM intrusions, brief moments where parts of the REM system flicker on while you're awake or semi-awake. You may not enter full REM sleep in the classic sense. Instead, REM features appear, dream imagery and narrative fragments. REM-like emotional tone, often intense or strange. Sometimes atonia-related sensations, heaviness, weakness, paralysis. Altered perception that resembles hallucination rather than imagination. This connects directly to phenomena like hypnagogic, sleep onset, and hypnopompic, waking hallucinations. But in narcolepsy, the boundary timing is unreliable, so the dream system can activate even when you weren't trying to sleep. Networks. What flips during a micro-dream? From a brain network perspective, dreaming, especially vivid REM dreaming, often involves increased activity in regions that generate emotion and imagery, and altered activity in regions that support rational monitoring. A simplified map looks like this. Limbic and paralimbic regions, emotion and salience, can become more influential, which may explain why microdreams feel meaningful or urgent. Visual association areas can produce imagery even without external input, making brief scenes feel projected into awareness. Prefrontal control regions, especially those involved in reality testing and sustained attention, may be less dominant during REM-like intrusions. That doesn't mean the brain is off, but the balance shifts. Internal simulation becomes louder than external verification. And because this can happen in bursts, the experience feels like a sudden cutaway shot in a film. Your awareness jumps tracks, then returns. Neurochemistry. Why it's so vivid, so fast. REM involves a distinct chemical pattern. Changes in cholinergic, monoaminergic, serotonin, norepinephrine, and other modulatory systems. You don't need to run the entire REM program to get dreamlike output. Sometimes a partial shift is enough to generate imagery, plus emotion, plus narrative, especially when the brain is already sleep-pressured. Sleep pressure matters. If you're chronically deprived or your brain is fighting strong daytime sleepiness, it becomes easier for REM-like elements to break through. That's one reason why these episodes can cluster during monotonous tasks, low stimulation, or moments of fatigue. Time distortion. How a few seconds feel like a whole scene. A key mystery is how something so brief can feel so complete. Here, neuroscience offers a useful idea. The brain doesn't record experience like a stopwatch. It builds a coherent interpretation from fragments. When internal imagery turns on abruptly, your brain can generate a scene with astonishing efficiency, using memory templates, emotional cues, and predictive shortcuts. So, even if the raw episode lasts seconds, the brain can stamp it as a finished event, like a compressed file that still contains a lot of information. In other words, the dream isn't long, it's dense. And that density, combined with the instability of sleep state gates in narcolepsy, is what makes seconds-long dreams feel less like daydreaming, and more like reality briefly losing its lock. If seconds-long dreams feel like a private glitch, science meets them in a very unromantic place. A sleep laboratory with electrodes glued to the scalp, cameras recording the body, and the brain's invisible borders made visible by lines on a screen. The lab-proof REM arrives too early. One of the most important tools here is the polysomnogram, PSG at night, and the multiple sleep latency test, MSLT, during the day. The MSLT gives a person several nap opportunities, typically 5, spaced across the day, to measure how quickly sleep begins and whether REM appears at sleep onset, something called a SOREM, sleep onset REM period. In many people with narcolepsy, REM doesn't wait. It can appear within minutes, sometimes strikingly fast, supporting the idea that dream physiology can ignite almost immediately when the brain's state control is unstable. And here's the key for seconds-long dreams. You don't necessarily need a long descent into sleep to get dreamlike output. If REM-related systems are already leaking, the brain may generate REM-style imagery and emotion in extremely brief bursts, especially under strong sleep pressure. The biological anchor, orexin, and the broken gate. For years, narcolepsy looked mysterious, until a chain of discoveries tied it to hypocretin, orexin, a wake-stabilizing neuropeptide system. A historical overview lays out the timeline. Orexin hypocretin was discovered in 1998. In 1999, genetic links to narcolepsy appeared in animal models, and by 2000, evidence showed that most human narcolepsy with cataplexy involves profound loss of hypocretin cells. A landmark 2000 study found an 85 to 95% reduction in hypocretin, HCRT neurons in human narcolepsy, suggesting the brain's stabilizer system is dramatically diminished. Exactly the kind of change that could allow REM features to intrude at the wrong moments. This matters because it reframes the dream in seconds not as imagination, but as state boundary failure. Wakefulness isn't held steady, and REM-like processes can flicker on, fast. REM intrusion as a recognized feature. Modern clinical summaries and reviews describe narcolepsy as a condition where REM-related phenomena intrude into wakefulness, including sleep-related hallucinations, sleep paralysis, abnormal dreams, and disrupted REM organization. This is crucial. Science doesn't need to claim that every micro-episode is full REM sleep. It only needs to support the more realistic idea that REM features can appear partially, briefly, and repeatedly, producing the subjective experience of a dream fragment that arrives like a flash. Documented case atmosphere, automatic behavior, and missing time. And then there are the human stories that feel almost cinematic, except they're recorded clinically. In a classic 1979 case report, researchers described a narcoleptic patient whose automatic behavior became so severe it led to shoplifting. Actions carried out with impaired awareness and later confusion about what even happened. It was a stark illustration of how narcolepsy can create islands of time where the body moves forward, but consciousness is unstable. Why include this in a video about seconds-long dreams? Because it shows the same underlying theme: micro-failures of wake-state continuity. Whether the content becomes a dream fragment, a hallucination-like perception, or an automatic action, the common thread is that the brain briefly stops operating as a single unified state. When hallucination and dream blur, a systematic review on narcolepsy and psychosis discusses a clinically important point. The typical hallucinations in narcolepsy are often attributed to partial REM intrusions while awake, which is exactly the conceptual bridge you need to understand seconds-long dream events without exaggeration. So the evidence doesn't point to magic. It points to something more unsettling. A brain that can generate dream logic instantly because the machinery of dreaming is never fully locked away. And when the lock fails, the dream doesn't politely wait for the night. Seconds-long dreams in narcolepsy leave us with an uncomfortable realization. The mind does not need time to create meaning. It only needs permission. What feels like a dream isn't defined by duration, darkness, or unconsciousness. It's defined by a shift in authority, when the external world briefly loses its dominance and the brain's internal simulator takes over. In narcolepsy, that shift can happen in the middle of a sentence, a hallway, a moment of stillness, and then it's gone. But the echo remains. These micro-dreams remind us that consciousness is not a solid object. It's a negotiated state, a fragile agreement between chemistry, memory, attention, and emotion. When that agreement loosens, even for seconds, the mind reveals how easily reality can be rewritten from the inside. For those who experience this phenomenon, the question isn't just, why does this happen? It becomes, how much of my waking life is already shaped by hidden simulations I never notice? Because if a dream can exist without sleep, if a story can be generated without warning, then perhaps the boundary we trust most, the line between dreaming and being awake, was never a wall at all, just a door, and sometimes it opens for a second.